Hey everybody, and welcome to this Premier League 2019-2020 preview video. I've purposely left this one quite late because transfer deadline day was literally yesterday, so I'm recording this on the Friday, as you can see, 9:44 a.m. On the 9th of August. So first game is tonight. It's Liverpool Vid Norwich, because I wanted to see what happened in the transfer window, because I think there was a lot of potential moves and a lot of moves which would really have switched things up, and I thought I'd leave it till after that to do it. Having said that, that means that I have some deliveries coming today, so if I have to run away from this video for a second, I apologise. I'm not editing it out because I have to get it uploaded and all sorted, so apologies if that happens, but we will crack on anyway. So yeah, hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you're all excited for the new season. I know I am. I think it's going to be a really fascinating season. We'll start off here and just have a look at the fantasy team, which I think I'm going to go into the first game with. I'm really unsure about some things. So I had Wesley, the Aston Villa forward. I decided to drop him and put in Keane. I had... who did I have in defence? I had Delph in defence. I decided to drop him and put in Zuma. Delph was actually injured. He was out the first game anyway, and I think Zuma may well play. And he's really cheap. He's like 5 million. Him and Christensen are like 5 million. They're very cheap defenders. I'm very unsure. I might change and put Keane in. I'm not sure if he's going to play first game though, because it was a fairly late transfer. But I also think that he's probably is going to. So I'm not sure. But I think this will be my first team going into the game, and we'll chat, I'm sure, about some of these players as we go through. So what I thought we'll do first is go through each club and talk about their chances, their season, alphabetically, and we can also talk about some of the transfers they did, and we'll do a little predictor at the end as well for where I think teams are going to finish, because I know everyone loves that, and we can look back at the end of the season and laugh. As maybe some teams who we think do well do terribly, and then there's always some shock somewhere along the line. So let's start off with Arsenal. You guys know I do love Arsenal. And now Arsenal had an interesting transfer deadline day. If we go, I guess, to their squad overall, we can see they did... does it even... Yeah, it does. That's funny, he's still in his Chelsea kit. So they did sign a couple of defenders on the transfer deadline day. So in Arsenal, they had Gabriel Martinelli. Looks very much like a kind of one for the future rather than going to start this season. They're Ceballos in midfield. Saliba actually went out on loan back to Saint Etienne, so he won't be there. Big summer signing was Nicolas Pepe, a winger, or kind of attacking winger slash, wide forward, whatever you want to call them nowadays, and Kieran Tierney, left back as well. So they haven't actually got David Luiz on there, have they? That's weird. But yeah, they signed David Luiz as well. So yeah, interesting transfer window for Arsenal. A lot of people were saying about Arsenal, oh, they only have this much money, they only have that much money. If we kind of look at it and say, okay, well, that was a loan. This was about 70 million. This was about 25. This was, I think, about 15, 20. And they made back about 30 to 40, I think. So I'd say they probably spent a little bit more than the 50 people were talking, but not much more than that. In terms of how their squad looks, you would imagine Leno's going to be number one, Bellerin at right back. Central defence will be interesting, I guess, about what they're going to do. Are they going to play a 3? Are they going to play a 2? David Luiz, in my opinion, plays much better in a 3, only because, let's face it, defensively, David Luiz is not the greatest. He is much better as a kind of attacking defender. He can pass, but he is prone to the odd mistake. Is he an upgrade on what they had already? So they had centrally, I guess, Mustafi, Mavropanos, I guess Chambers, but I'm not sure if he really is in their thinking. Holding, who looked good last season. Socrates, you know, they definitely have enough to play a 3. I don't know, honestly, if they will or not. I personally would. I guess Luiz, you could say, is an upgrade over a Mustafi, because he's probably going to make as many mistakes as Mustafi. He's just better on the ball. So I think if you can just own that, then that's maybe not so bad. I think one of the probably the good things he will add is he's a bit of a character, Luiz. He's obviously vastly experienced. He's won Champions League, Europa League, leagues. So he's obviously a proven Premier League defender in so much as, he's not going to take time to adjust to the Premier League, is he? He knows it inside out. But we all know David Luiz is not the best defender, and in an Arsenal side which I feel like needs a Virgil van Dijk. It needs someone to come in there, or a Harry Maguire almost, I guess, to come in there and be the focal point, the kind of the star defender who's going to help to bring everybody up a level. Is he that guy? I don't think he is. I think he's nearly there. I just think his defending is too poor to kind of be that guy. I think he's a character. He's obviously going to bring a lot to the dressing room. Whether or not he's the type of leader, like the professional leader that they need, who's going to kick people's asses in the dressing room, or if he's just more of the kind of like the motivator, the I don't want to say the clown, because I think that's unfair, but like the joker of the pack, and I don't know. I think Arsenal needed that Roy Keane character, the Patrick Vieira, who's going to take people, who've had a bad game and by the neck and lay into them, and let them know that it's not acceptable. I don't think he's that player. So they apparently paid around 8 million for him. I think, to be honest with you, it's one of those transfers where it's like, I think Chelsea will feel happy with it, and I think Arsenal will feel happy with it, because at the end of the day, Arsenal got a Premier League defender for not a lot of money, although his wages will be fairly high, let's face it. Chelsea had a player who clearly could have been disruptive this season to them, wasn't, was fourth choice, basically centre-back, in probably what would be a 2. Obviously experienced, but perhaps wasn't in their manager's, mind. And they offloaded his wages and, got 8 to 12 million, I guess, back for it. So they are probably happy with that. So I think it's one of those deals where it's like both parties can be happy. It doesn't have to be a case where, one club's unhappy or one club got ripped off or anything like that. I think it's one of those deals where both teams got what they wanted. I don't think David Luiz is going to make the difference for Arsenal. We'll talk about them. Well, I guess we can talk about it now. I don't think Arsenal are going to challenge for the Champions League spots this season. I think when you go through their team, they have a fantastic forward lineup. Lacazette and Aubameyang, proven Premier League strikers, brilliant. Pepe, I think, is a good player. My opinion on this might be a bit controversial. I don't feel like Pepe is as good a buy as Zaha would have been for them, simply because I think Pepe's had one very good season, but in France. Okay, I know everyone was like, listen, apart from Mbappe, he was the best player in that league. I get you, and a lot of players have come from the French league and done very well. Lacazette is a prime example of that. However, it's another level up to play in the Premier League. It will take some time for him to adjust. I think Zaha, if you look at him, he's been there and done that, in a team which, relied on him to a vast extent. And I think for the price they paid for Pepe, which apparently was like 70, 75. Now, it could be different deal structures and all that. Let's not get into that. At the end of the day, I think they could have brought Pepe, they could have brought Zaha. I think they would have been better off with Zaha. Maybe I'm biased, and I know Arsenal fans will be like, no, this guy's better because you've got him. I understand that, but and he could come in and light up the Premier League, and he could be, this could be a fearsome lineup if they can play Lacazette, Aubameyang and Pepe. That will scare the hell out of defences. I feel like in midfield, Ceballos is a decent midfielder. There's always question marks around Xhaka. El Nene's still there as well, is he? Mkhitaryan has never really done it. They haven't solved the Ozil problem. What's he going to be doing this season? Torreira looked good in parts last season, but he needs to really push on. Guendouzi looked very good, but he's still very raw. I don't see a leader in that midfield, somebody who's going to push the team on. If you said to me like who's going to be the captain, I wouldn't really know. I don't see a player there who's going to be at that level. So I think Tierney's a good signing for them. Obviously, again, he'll have to step up. I think 25 million is a bit of a steal. If you think he's battling it out in the Scottish team with Robertson, so they kind of put him on par with him, and Robertson is a fantastic left back. I would say Robertson does go ahead of Tierney, to be fair, based upon last season. But I think before that they were both thought of at the same level. So I think that they've got themselves a really good defender there. Left back that they needed. Monreal was never going to be, he really, I think, is past his prime. Kolasinac, I think, has done well, but they needed some more competition kind of there. I would say that perhaps at right back, Bellerin was out for a lot of the season. I know Tierney has played at right back because he's done it for Scotland, where they put Robertson, I think, on the left and then him on the right. But I don't think that's an ideal situation for him. Maybe that's where Chambers comes in as a kind of... He has played more centre back, but he can play right back as well. I look at Arsenal's team and I see top six, but I unless these guys go on a tear and they are just outscoring all their opponents, I can't see them breaking into that top four, which is where they really need to be. Because history gets you so far. Do you know what I mean? It gets you. Man United have been trading on history for a few seasons now and still been able to get some big players in. But you can also see this season, I think, that Man United have struggled to attract some of the big players. They've had to adjust what they wanted to do because the big players want to play in the Champions League. That's where you got to be. You got to be up there. The top players want to go to a side where they know there's a high likelihood they're going to win trophies. They're going to be playing with highly motivated players. And, at the minute at Arsenal, I don't quite see that. I think they've had a good window in that they have strengthened some areas they really needed to strengthen. They obviously lost Ramsey. That's a big loss. He's a fantastic player. But otherwise, in terms of a lot of the players they lost were players who I think needed to go. The Koscielny thing, I don't get. I'll be honest with you. The Koscielny thing where Arsenal fans were upset because he had a video where he took off the Arsenal shirt and there was a Bordeaux shirt underneath. I genuinely think that is outrage for outrage's sake. I can understand they're pissed off because of the way the transfer came about, but I think in the cold light of day, if you really look at that logically, I don't see that as being a slight on the club or anything. I think it's just one of those shitty transfer announcements videos that people do. I don't get why taking off his Arsenal shirt. If anything, doesn't it say like, I was Arsenal, rather than just being like, hey, it's all about Bordeaux now. It's like, I was Arsenal, now I'm Bordeaux. This is what happens, isn't it, in football? I can understand, though, people being pissed off about him not going on the tour and kind of forcing his way out. And I can understand that people kind of being like, oh, we kind of made this guy, we made this player and everything like that. But it's football. Do you know what I mean? This happens. Like, you're gonna it's gonna happen in your life. Like when you go into a relationship with a girl or a guy, you don't necessarily go into that relationship do you think you're like, great, I'm never going to need to see anybody else in my life, this is my first relationship, I'm never going to leave them. I mean, maybe it does happen with some people, but the likelihood is you are just going to have different relationships across time, until eventually you find somebody. Perhaps, maybe this is not a good analogy, I don't know. My point is, footballers move around. He clearly didn't want to be at Arsenal anymore. I don't think Arsenal lost a lot by losing him. I'll be honest with you. I think he was past his prime. He had big injury problems and he wanted to obviously go back to France. I don't see a problem with it personally. I think the Iwobi one was interesting. my opinion of Iwobi is that he never quite fitted into the Arsenal side. I don't know if they really used him like to his potential. I don't even know what he is really. Is he like a winger? Is he more of like a attacking central midfielder? I don't really know. I'm not sure he knows. So that's an interesting one. I think they needed to bring some money in. I think they were like, this guy, you know, he would be useful to them without a doubt. But they have some young good players coming through. You know, Willock, Smith Rowe, Nelson. I don't know if they loaned any of them out actually. I don't think they did they? So I think this could be a big season for those players coming through. The only one they loaned out, I think, was Nketiah, who was a striker. But I think, you know, these kind of young guys they've got coming through have looked pretty good. They've done some good things. But we've also seen that maybe someone like Ashley Maitland-Niles, you know, was thrust in at right back. And I would be honest and say I think he struggled a lot. It doesn't mean he will this season. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. I think he just struggled in there. So in terms of backups, I think it's good they have some kind of young, hungry players who can come on. But yeah. So I think overall Arsenal, I think they had a decent transfer market. I don't think Arsenal fans will be too disappointed. I do feel, though, that they are missing that big leader that they just have never managed to address for a long time. Aston Villa coming up into the Premier League. Let's go and have a look at Aston Villa. Aston Villa's club profile. Come up, and I think they've made some smart signings, Villa. They're always probably one of the clubs that I felt would be best equipped to stay in the Premier League, because they are, you know, I don't want to say like, but historically they are a big club. You know, they have a big ground, they have a big support, and they have a bit of financial backing without probably going Fulham crazy. Does that make sense? I wouldn't say they've brought in, you know, they haven't gone crazy with the guys they've brought in. I think Heaton is a very good signing for them. Experienced Premier League goalkeeper, very good. He is getting on a bit, but goalkeepers last a long time. You know, their use by date is much longer than normal players. So, you know, I think they'll get a good couple of seasons out of him, without a doubt. They signed Courtney House, who they had on loan, and Tyrone Mings, who they had on loan last season. So they are signings, but also, you know, they know the club, so that's great. I think defensively, you know, I don't think they're too bad. They signed Ezri Konsa as well, I think. Did they sign him this season? Yeah, Ezri Konsa, who's a decent young defender. But again, I worry a little bit about their defence. I think in midfield they're fairly strong. You know, Grealish is clearly going to be their guy. McGinn looked brilliant last season. You know, and they've strengthened with some other guys: Trezeguet, Douglas Luiz, Jota. They're up front. They look a little bit short, don't they? Really, 3 recognised forwards. Wesley being the guy who I think that they've got their eye on to score their goals. I worry for them in terms of scoring goals on there. I clearly they're going to have a battle against relegation. I don't think they're going to be a Wolves, you know, and come up and you know, do really, really well. Because I think goals are the problem. I think Wolves had 2 excellent strikers who scored goals. I don't think Aston Villa have got that. I think Wesley could be very good, but you know, I will be honest and say I don't rate the other 2, Davis and Kodjia. Is it Kodjia? I wouldn't rate them as Premier League strikers. So I could be wrong. You know, I'd like to see Aston Villa stay up. I like them as a club, as I say. I remember the times when Aston Villa were, you know, jostling it out for top 6, or even, you know, even in Europe. Yeah, I think they've got some work to do. I do think they have a very good manager, and they obviously have, you know, someone like John Terry in the backroom staff. So it will be interesting to see them. I think they're going to give it a good go, as they say. They you know, and I think even if they get, I don't think they've outdone themselves, as in even if they get relegated, I don't think it's going to be a complete disaster for them. So I think they've done okay in a transfer. I think they've signed what they would have wanted. With what they can do, they were never going to be able to go in and spend, 50 million on a Premier League striker, were they? So they've just, I think, done what they've done, really. Bournemouth. Bournemouth. I feel like Bournemouth have been incredibly quiet. Like, no one has spoken about Bournemouth. Who have they signed? Lloyd Kelly, Jack Stacey, Philip Billing, Danjuma and Wilson on loan. They lost Mings, obviously, like 20 million. They lost a few other guys, but, not that much. Every season, I always think, like, is this the season Bournemouth are going to struggle? And they never do. So I just kind of give up on them, really. I think they'll probably just finish mid to lower league, lower table, and just be fine. I think keeping hold of Ryan Fraser was pretty key. He was linked a lot of the summer with, moves away. Callum Wilson as well. I'm so surprised someone like Callum Wilson is still there. So they've got Solanke as well. They've got goals in them. Harry Wilson, we know, was fantastic last season with Derby. Big season for him, I think, to step up. But I think he looks like a real quality player. Brooks absolutely set the Premier League alight to begin with. Faded a little bit, I think, towards the end. Someone like Jordan Ibe hasn't really, I don't think, kicked on as much as they probably would have wanted him to. But again, big season for him, I think. And I like the look of Bournemouth's squad, actually. I think there's a lot of good attacking players there. They look pretty solid. Defence-wise, Nathan Ake, again, held on to him. There was a lot of people wanting to come in for him. Price tag they were looking at was about 70 million, because I think they were like, well, he's a Dutch international defender, and if Harry Maguire's worth 80, then he's worth 70. So I think they priced him out the market there. If he has another good season, I think they might struggle to keep hold of him. But, they've still got some Simon Francis and Steve Cook are just like, these guys, how long have they been at like Bournemouth for? Like forever? Like just forever. So yeah, and Artur Boric, Begovic, I think they're going to be solid, kind of mid-table-ish, like mid-lower table-ish, really. Bournemouth, I think, to kick on to the next level, they need to build a new stadium. Their stadium is tiny. I think there will be the support for them in the area if they do that. And clearly, Eddie Howe into another season in the Premier League has, I don't want to say single-handedly transformed the club, but he has been a driving force to do that. So yeah, I think they'll have a Bournemouth season, I think. Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton Hove Albion. Who have they signed this season? Matt Clark, Leandro Tossard, Taylor Richards, Lewis Freestone, Adam Webster, Neil Mopay, Romarich Yapi, and Aaron Mui. I think it is Mue. Anyway, have they lost anyone massive? Not really. I don't think you would argue. Few, youngsters out on loan, basically. They've done a bit of a Bournemouth, I think, really. They did, I think, their transfer record was broken with Mopay. They paid at least 20 million for him, and I think they did definitely need a striker. Like, Glenn Murray's not going to be around forever, is he? Jesus, the guy must be like 36 by now. And he's done really well, I think, at Brentford it was. They got him from. He's looked quality, and I'm very interested to see how he looks in the Premier League. Some of the other players. Could you go away, Epic Store? Thank you. Some of the other players, I think, didn't set the Premier League alight, but sometimes, especially when you have players coming from different countries, it takes them a little while to adjust and get in. So they could have a good season. I think I'm just going to call him Aaron. Aaron looked like Huddersfield's best player without a doubt, and he could be a real force for them. Like him before, I think he's a very good player, and he'll be a loss to Huddersfield and a big gain, I think, for Brighton. And overall, their defence midfield looks okay. I worry that there isn't really, I kind of don't think it looks like the best midfield in the world, but it was pretty much their midfield last season, really, wasn't it? So they did okay-ish. They had a poor kind of finish to the season, didn't they? I don't know if they... I think my internet's being slow. I think they had a poor finish to the season. But let's try and see if there's anything to... What's this? Oh, appearances, goals. All-time Premier League goals, 25 for Glenn Murray. He's going to be difficult to replace for them, isn't he? So they obviously had a bad finish the season, lost Houghton. Graham Potter's come in. I rate Graham Potter as a very good manager. I think they're decent enough to stay up, Brighton, but I wouldn't expect them to set the Premier League alight. But I think they are decent enough to definitely, mid-table-ish, maybe avoid the bulk of the issues with relegation. I'm just pausing because I think my delivery might be here, guys. So you have to. Yep, it's here.
Hello. There we go. All right, lovely. Thank you. Bye.
Sorry about that, everyone. Yep, my delivery was here. So again, I don't think they're going to set the Premier League alight. I'd be surprised if they get sucked into a relegation battle, but sometimes you just don't know. I think they'll have enough about them to be okay. Right, where do we want to go back to? We wanted... Oh God, I've lost myself now. Clubs, there we go. Okay, Burnley. Burnley had a poor season last season, even by their own standards. However, how much of that was down to having a small squad and trying to cope with the Europa League, the early start, the Thursday night football, etc., etc., it didn't really work for them. They haven't had that this season, have they? If we look at who they've signed, doesn't exactly set the world alight. I think the Drinkwater one is pretty good, but again, they haven't really lost anyone, have they? They lost Heaton, but they've still got Pope and Hart, and I think that's fine. They signed Bailey Peacock-Farrell from Leeds, and I think that is a good young keeper for them. They've still got, the guys they've got in defence, Tarkowski, Gibson, these guys who are just Burnley, defenders, dogged, stubborn. Dwight McNeil looked pretty good last season. I think Drinkwater comes in and adds some good depth to the midfield. Brady's obviously decent. Hendricks, decent. Defoe's being good for them. Up front, they brought in Rodriguez, who was with them previously. I don't know. Burnley are just Burnley, aren't they? Really, I think they're just going to finish mid-table, lower mid-table-ish again, and that's it. They're just like Brighton and Bournemouth, which is like they don't have the resources to push on from where they are, but they do what they do just kind of solidly. So it's fine, but if they lose Sean Dyche or Big comes in for one of their players, can they replace them with some quality? It's difficult. Let's talk about Chelsea next, because Chelsea are interesting, aren't they? I mean, Burnley are interesting, but they're kind of just Burnley, aren't they? Chelsea had a transfer ban. We all know this. Well, most of us will know this. So they couldn't sign any players. They kind of did sign a player though in Kovacic, and they also signed Pulisic as well. The itches, double itch, itchy and scratchy. Hey, he's got his Palace kit on. But they lost a lot of players. Ish. They did. They lost a big player in Gary Cahill. No, I'm joking. In Eden Hazard. In terms of goal, Kepa, obviously, I think he had a decent season. I don't think anybody could be really disappointed with him. I thought he was decent. The whole League Cup final thing was a bit weird, but I don't think we'll see that again from him. And he is young, and he has to learn. Rudiger, I think, is a brilliant defender. I think he's very underrated, actually. I think his defender. I think he's up there with the best. So they've got him, I think, to be very solid. Alonso's weird because there are sometimes attacking wise, like he's fantastic. I think brilliant. Some question marks about defensively, but I think he's pretty decent. Zappacosta never really taken off, has he? He was a Antonio Conte signing, and I guess decent enough backup. If you look kind of central defensively, you got Rudiger, Christensen, Zuma, and Tomori, I believe. I think that's enough. They obviously lost Cahill and Luis. Cahill, very experienced. I was slightly surprised that they kind of let him go because I think he would have been great as a backup, but obviously he had some big issues with Sarri last season. It's kind of sad the way he kind of went. I feel a bit sorry for the guy because I think he was a great servant for Chelsea, and he's very unassuming, like I think Cahill's the sort of player where he's not a David Luiz. He's not going to ping up a 60-yard Hollywood pass and have his hair frizzing about and kind of endear himself to the fans in that kind of way, but he is just a totally solid professional, and I think they'll miss him in defence. But overall, I think defensively they're fine. Midfield, again, they got so Jorginho, Kante, Barkley, Loftus-Cheek, Pulisic, Kovacic. Not really counting Kennedy, I guess. They got Bakayoko back. Mason Mount had a great season. Marco van Ginkel, I couldn't even believe this guy was still at the club. Like, seriously. Is he ever gonna? I don't know, but I think that's a really good midfield. If they play with, I don't know what. I guess they're going to play with 3 in midfield. I don't really know offhand. Barkley's looked really good pre-season. I highly rate Loftus-Cheek. I hope he gets more of a chance. Jorginho, I think it never quite worked out with him. I don't think last season, but I think also he's had a season now under his belt. Kante is just fantastic. Pulisic, I have high hopes for him. I have him in my fantasy team because I think he's a real quality player, that kind of winger. Is he as good as Hazard? No, not yet. He has the potential, I think, to be right up there, and they paid a lot of money for him, so I think he has too. But it will take him time to adjust to the Premier League. He is still a young player. He speaks the language. He's going to be, more used to the kind of culture, I guess, because he's American in that sense. Probably won't like the weather, but there you go. I'm stereotyping here. I'm sure he'll be fine. But yeah, I think he was a really good signing. And obviously, they signed him before the transfer ban, so he's in there. Kovacic, for me, I didn't feel like he did enough last season to warrant them signing him, but I think they already had an agreement in place, and they were like, well, we need to sign someone because we can't sign anyone else, so I kind of feel like that. I think he has potential, but I certainly didn't feel like I think if they didn't have a transfer ban, I wonder whether or not they would have signed him, and I think he was like 50 million, so I think 30 to 50 million, I think Real Madrid were fairly happy with that, shall we say, because he certainly didn't do anything there either. So I think really decent midfield. Mason Mount, I think, could be a big player for them. Barkley looks brilliant pre-season, as I said. Up front, you have... it's up front, I think they have a lot of options. I'm just not sure if they know necessarily what their best kind of striker is. Willian and Pedro are obviously the experienced kind of like wide players. Both still very good, although I would argue that they're a little bit on the wane, a touch. But then they have, Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi, who are the young players coming through. So I think that they're brilliantly stocked in that, sense. The central striker, I think, is the issue. And I think they have three very good ones, each who are going to bring you, different things. Giroud, Abraham, Batshuayi. I personally feel, and again, maybe I'm biased because he's in a Palace kit, Batshuayi is the first choice. I would have him as first choice. I think he just has that striker's touch. I was impressed with him at Palace. He walked into a squad which you don't know, and he scored a few goals and he looked decent. He needs some matches, because he hasn't played very much. I think he looks decent. Giroud, I think, is just that player you bring on last 15, 20 minutes. If you need a goal, he gives you a different option. Abraham, I'm not personally convinced by him. I think he had a decent season last season with Villa in the Championship, scored a lot of their goals, and Villa will miss him. I just don't know. He isn't proven for me in the Premier League, whereas Giroud and I think Batshuayi are. Like, they've proven they can score goals in the Premier League. So my first choice would be Batshuayi to play, with Giroud coming off the bench, and then Abraham's that kind of backup player you can play, if someone gets injured or whatever. So I think Chelsea are genuinely pretty stocked. The big question is going to be around Frank Lampard. Is he going to be is he good enough? Is he tactically good enough? Is he a good enough manager, to take this club forward? I don't think anyone can answer that yet. I think he had an okay season at Derby. I think he failed in what he wanted to do, which was take Derby to the Premier League. But I also feel that a lot of managers but only 3 teams can go up in the Championship, and it is a cutthroat league. And when you get to the final of the playoffs, that is a lottery. I've been there as a Palace supporter, and the slimmest of margins make or break it for you. It really, form goes out the window with that one, and it's just who's the lucky one on the day, and they were unlucky. And so I kind of feel like that he's got a lot to prove this season. I look at that squad and I think they're definitely good enough to make top 4. I look at their manager and I wonder whether or not he is good enough to get them to top 4. We'll see. I hope he is. I hope he does well. It's nice when you have a club legend, go to a club as a manager and take them forward. But it's a risky one. And Chelsea are cutthroat with their managers. We've seen that. Obviously, I feel like he maybe has a bit of a free pass this season, so long as he gets top 6 because of the transfer ban. But I also feel like that squad is definitely good enough. I feel like that squad is good enough to challenge for the title on paper. Maybe you could argue that Christensen and Zuma are centre-back, maybe a bit of a weak link. But I don't. But Zuma, he played on loan at Everton last season and did well. So it's not like he's not experienced enough. Christensen's come in and looked good. So I feel like if he gets them rocking and he can get that real feel-good factor going and people playing with confidence, like they could be a surprise this season, or it could go terribly wrong. I don't know either way with them. I'd rate them for top 4, but I think on paper I like the look of their squad a lot. I just think that striker-wise, that one striker, in the past they've had a Costa, which has been brilliant for them, or a Drogba. I don't see either of those 3 players as a central striker, like being a 25 goal a season guy. The only guy I could see potentially doing that would be Batshuayi, but I don't know if they have enough faith in him. I think he's good. I think he's very good. But we'll see, I guess. Right, let's talk about Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace is going to win the league. I'm joking. Crystal Palace. So the big news I guess we have to talk about is Wilfried Zaha. Okay, so most of you know I'm a Palace fan. I guess, maybe, I don't know. But I am a Palace fan. And every season, Crystal Palace's objective is just try and keep your best players. For the love of God, just try and keep your best players. Two of our players obviously stood out a mile. Or I'd say three of them did, but we'll get to that in a minute. But two of our players, were the ones who were rumoured to leave. We lost one in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Disappointed that we lost him. Yes, I think we could have gotten others. I think he should have stayed for another season. Do I begrudge him moving to a big club? No, not at all. I never do. The difference between paying for Palace in the Premier League and playing for Man United is huge. Man United, I don't feel like are what they were, but they clearly are still a massive club and vastly bigger than Crystal Palace in terms of resources, in terms of support, everything. So you can't blame the lad for wanting to go there, and I feel like we got a fair deal out of it. 50 million or whatever it was with add-ons, etc., blah blah blah, but around 50 million I think was exactly what he was worth in terms of his potential and just where he is right now. I was disappointed Palace didn't sign a replacement for him, so I think Joel Ward's going to go back there, and Joel Ward is a solid Premier League right back. He's not as good as Aaron Wan-Bissaka, so it does weaken us a little bit, but he is a solid Premier League right back with experience, so we're not destitute in that place. Martin Kelly can also play right back as well. Again, they're not as good, but we are where we are. Hopefully we're going to play Guaita in goal, because he's just looked vastly superior to Hennessy. He also doesn't do Nazi salutes, so that is a plus in my mind. I think I made that joke before, actually. But anyway, in terms of centre-backs, this is where I think we're actually pretty strong. So we signed Gary Cahill, which I think is a really good signing. Very professional, worked with Hodgson before, great Premier League knowledge. Probably not the quickest guy, but Palace play with a pretty deep line anyway. I feel like him with Sacco, Dan and Tompkins, that's a really good centre-back kind of, 4 players there. And we also have other players you can slot in there like Reed Ward, Kelly. They've all played centre-back as well. So I think we're really well stocked in that place. In terms of left-back, Van Arnholt, I rate very highly. I think he's a very good left-back. Schlupp can obviously play there as well, although Roy loves playing him in midfield as well, and he actually had a pretty good run last season. So that's there. In terms of players, I said we had 2 main players, but maybe 3, and I count the third as Milivojevic, who I generally feel like is a top 6 midfielder, and he just goes under the radar constantly, and I'm so happy about that, because it means he's still a Crystal Palace player. I think our midfield is vastly stronger than it was last season. We really struggled to replace Cabaye. I don't necessarily feel like we have replaced him as such, but I think Max Meyer now with another season under his belt can step up more to that role. Kouyaté, who we got last season with West Ham, very good kind of midfielder. MacArthur has looked really good. Townsend has become more consistent, I think. Started to look like his old self last season. We've signed Camarasa and McCarthy. That can only help. I think we got McCarthy. There's rumours it was between about 3 and 8 million. And I think that's a bargain, because he's going to come in and give 100% for you. He might not set the world on fire in what he's doing, but you can rely on this guy, and he's solid, tough tackling. He's going to get stuck in, and I think that's a really good signing. I'm very happy with that. Camarasa, I think he's on loan originally. I think he can bring a little bit more skill and technique to the midfield, which is great. And Wilfried Zaha is still a Crystal Palace player. I can't believe Wilfried Zaha is still a Crystal Palace player, honestly. I'm almost disappointed. I want to see this guy go on and play for top clubs and play in the Champions League. I know he's not going to be happy to be at Crystal Palace again this season. That's clear. It's a tricky one though, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, from the club's point of view, they value him at a price, and clubs were not willing to pay that price. So what are you supposed to do? Do you let him go cheaper than that, or do you keep him? I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? I mean, people are like, oh, I think Arsenal came in for like 50 million or something like that, and 40, 50 million, and it's like, the guy's worth more. If you're going to pay 70 million for Pepe, don't try and insult us by giving us 40, 50 million for Zaha. He's a top 6 player, like, without a doubt. He would be the player I would have signed as Chelsea manager if they could sign someone to replace Hazard. He can do what Hazard can do. And I think people... I don't know what it is about Zaha that people don't rate. I understand he went to Man United and it didn't work out. But it didn't work out at Man United because they didn't play the guy. Like, that was the problem. He was signed by Sir Alex Ferguson. They brought in Moyes. Moyes just, I guess, didn't fancy him because he's not a David Moyes player, is he? Like, he is a flair player. He is a guy who has the ball at his feet and will dribble. And I don't think David Moyes wants that from a player. And he was very young. He was only like 21, I think, at the time. He is now much more mature, much more of a leader of this team. He's still prone to be, to outburst about things or to lose his temper and stuff, but he is a guy who on the pitch cares and, will put in the effort. And I think he is a quality player, and I cannot believe no one brought him. I cannot believe it. I'm happy he's going to be with us. I think Hodgson said it best yesterday, where he was like, at the end of the day, I think Zaha, he said he had beef with the owners, not with the club as such. And I think that's true. Like, I think he is unhappy that the owners didn't let him go, and I totally understand that. From his point of view, he would have wanted, I think, maybe... I don't feel like Arsenal or Everton were big enough clubs for him, though, as well. Like, I find it weird. I think he would be brilliant at, like, Man City. I rate him higher than Mahrez, absolutely. But for whatever reason, clubs were not prepared to pay the. I think we would have sold him for 70, 75 million. I don't feel like that is outrageous for what he is and what he's done. People always go on about his stats and they're like, oh, look at his stats. He plays for Crystal Palace, guys. How good are your stats going to be? We battle relegation every season. Like, if you watch him play, you can see what he does. And he has also been playing a side with the worst strikers you will ever see. So if you put him up front with actual strikers, then the guy will be phenomenal. This is the biggest problem Crystal Palace have. We have not signed a striker. Everybody knows Crystal Palace need a striker. We looked so much better when we got Batshuayi last season. I wouldn't say he necessarily saved us or anything like that, but he looked brilliant. And I think if Chelsea hadn't have had a transfer ban, and I think they would have signed a striker, I think we could have signed him. And I don't know if maybe we're also waiting for that a little bit, because I really think he would be brilliant for us. But Benteke, this guy... Oh, Christian, we need a good season from him. Wickham, he came back from injury last season, and I don't know if he can get back to where he is, but on his day, he's very good. But I just don't know if that day's gone because of the injuries. I worry for him. I hope so, because I really like him. Ayew, I think, was just a decent, solid signing. I think it was like 2.5 million. Like, he's going to do a job for you, but again, he's not going to be a 15-goal season guy. Benteke has the potential to do that, but are we going to get the Benteke from his first season at Palace or the last 2 seasons at Palace, where he makes me want to tear my hair out? Clearly capable, has everything you want from a Premier League striker. He's actually deceptively quite quick, strong, decent technique, great in the air. Mentally is where he is fragile, and for whatever reason his confidence is shot to hell, and we need him back. I have no idea what he's going to be like this season. Last season I thought he was going to have a good season because he was knocking them in pre-season. I was like, okay, maybe he's got his mojo back. He didn't. He absolutely did not. But we need him. We need a striker. If one of these guys is firing, we will be absolutely fine. if they don't, and Zaha is not on his game because he's sulking a little bit or whatever, we could struggle. A lot of people tipping Palace to struggle this year. I think we've got enough to not do that. We have a really solid defence, and that gets us a long way. And Roy is a very experienced manager. Do not underestimate Roy Hodgson in any way, shape or form. Yeah, I look at these signings and I'm happy with them. I think they're all decent signings. Just for me, the only thing we needed was a striker. Like, I would swap all of these players here for a decent Premier League striker. Every single one of them. When I see someone like Charlie Austin going for 4 million, I'm like, why could this guy not have done a job for us? It makes me tear my hair out when I look at players. I'm like, there must be players out there better than these three. I don't know. We'll see anyway. I see mid-table for Palace. I always do. Last season I had high hopes for them. I thought they could really push on, but this season, just let's not get in a relegation battle again, Palace. Yeah, please, please. Everton, I think, have been one of the most active sides in terms of signing, first team players, and certainly most active in terms of rumours and who they've been trying to sign. So they have signed in Lossell from Huddersfield, decent backup keeper, I guess, for Pickford. They've actually got 3 decent keepers, I think, there as well. It makes me wonder whether or not... Well, it just makes me wonder. Andre Gomez for 22 million. I think that is a very good signing. Clearly, Barcelona, he was not in their plans. They got a bit of cash back for him, and Everton got a very, very good midfielder who looked very good for them last season. So, brilliant signing for them. They obviously, playing on loan for them, he was really good, and that kind of, I felt like it was clear that Everton were going to sign him, if that makes sense. I was surprised that maybe you didn't see someone like a Man United or an Arsenal come in for him at that price. 22 million seems like a bit of a steal. Can't believe we say that about 22 million now, but it does seem like a bit of a steal. But I guess, he liked playing at Everton, so they were in pole position. Delph, I think, again, is a very good signing. Do they have him down here as a defender? Because they have him as a defender in fantasy, but they have him as a midfielder here because, same website, but whatever. Yeah, good, really good signing, very solid. I've always rated Fabian Delph. I think he was a bit lost at Man City, asked to play everywhere, every which way, but he always did a job whenever he played. So I think very decent signing. Moise Kean, I think it is pronounced, from Juventus, is a brilliant signing. Highly rate this guy. Looked awesome. Looks happy to step up, whether it was in his international debut, his Juventus debut, whatever. I think Juventus had to sell someone because financial fair play, etc., etc. They needed to bring some money back. He wasn't clearly going to be first choice there. Obviously, Ronaldo was going to be, but clearly a decent player. Very high potential, still very young. How old is he actually? He's 19. I think they've got a real player on their hands here. And Everton have struggled with strikers. We've always kind of said, a lot, Senk didn't really work out for them. Calvert-Lewin has never really, I don't think, broken through. Nias, again, hasn't really done that much. Richardson's a wide forward. Same with Walcott. I think this is a brilliant signing for them. I think it was 25 million as well, which seems like a really good price. They brought in Sidibe on loan from Monaco. I think he's a right back. We'll go through their players in a minute. But I think that's a good signing. I think he's a World Cup winner with France as well. So, not bad. And Iwobi from Arsenal. They love a cut price Arsenal player, don't they, Everton? Got Walcott and Iwobi now. The dream team. Yeah, again, I think Iwobi is very good midfielder. Not quite sure where his best position is, but yeah. I mean, if we go, they lost anybody big? I guess they haven't really. They've lost some experienced centre backs. I think that's where it's going they're going to hurt. They lost Idrissa Gueye to Paris Saint-Germain, which is a bit of a loss. Lookman never really quite worked out for them, so I don't think it's necessarily a loss. But if you look at their defence, this is where I think they are potentially going to struggle a little bit. Goalkeeper-wise, you've got to say Pickford's number one. I wouldn't say he had a great season last season, had a few mistakes, but I think he is still a very good goalkeeper. Baines at left-back, getting on a little bit, isn't he, really, if we're honest. Keane, I think, is a decent centre-back. Digny? It's not Digny, is it? It's Dien or something like that. I can't remember. Decent defender. Did very well last season, I think, fantasy-wise, scoring some good goals. Mina, I'd say the jury's still a little bit out on him. I think he looked solid. He didn't play for a lot early on. I think it took him a while to settle, but I think he looked better as he came in. Coleman had obviously a lot of injuries last season. I think we're yet to see whether he's going to come back to his best. Is he? Yeah, he's 30 now. You worry about the injuries there. Holgate's still a young player. Cuco Martina is decent enough, but I would say he's a second choice defender. And Sidibe, I guess, will probably come in there. I think they're a little bit, if they get an injury to a central defender or something like that, they look a little bit short, in my opinion. That's the worry for me in defence. I know they were trying to sign some defenders. They were trying to sign Roja or Smalling from Man United, I think. They were really trying, but I feel like they're a little bit short in defence. Midfield-wise, I think they're really well stocked. Besic actually has gone to Sheffield United, so he's not there, which is fine. He wasn't anywhere near first choice, I don't think, for them, to be fair. Sigurdsson is a quality midfielder. Schneiderlin, I don't feel like he's really come on, but it's a big season for him. Tom Davies as well has always looked good, I think, when he's come in, but again, hasn't really set the world alight. Bernard looked good second half of the season, I think. Gomez looked quality. I think he's a really good midfielder. Delph, I think, can come in and do a really good job. Same with Iwobi and Walcott, wide. Richarlison, I would count more as a wide forward, kind of midfielder-ish. And I think he looks really good as well. So I think from those options, they're actually pretty well stocked. I think losing Idrissa is a bit of a problem for them because they didn't really replace him. Like, I don't see a player in the same mould as him, like that kind of all-action tackling, Kante-style role. I think that's maybe where Schneiderlin can come in a little bit, but we'll see if he's capable there. And, I mean, if their defence, I think a starting 11 defence is fine, but if they get a few injuries, they perhaps would need a bit of protection at the back there. And that's where I think they might struggle. But going forward, I think they look pretty good as well. A lot of people are tipping Everton to, shake things up in the top six. I would say the jury's out on that one, frankly. I think they signed some good players. I think they didn't quite get all they wanted, if that makes sense. So I still think that defence is a little bit rough. So we'll see, basically, with Everton. Definitely should be around. I mean, they have to get top six. They've been spending money for years, and they've got a new stadium coming, so I don't know how much longer they can keep signing 25-30 million pound players every season. But because if you think about it, they probably spent 22, maybe another 10, so that's 32. Call it another 25, so that's 57. Iwobi was about 30, so that's 87 million, plus a few million there. You could call it 90 million to round it up a little bit, and they got back like 30 million. I'd say they've probably spent 50 million net-ish. I don't know how much they got for a lot of these players, actually, but I think a lot of them were free, I'll be honest. So yeah, should be interesting season for Everton. I think a lot of pressure is going on, Ken, for a 19-year-old who's going to be playing the Premier League this season. Like, yeah, I don't think he's going to start the first game. Actually, I think I've got him on the bench there, but I think I might even swap Zuma into the number one spot there. I think he could come on and do quite well. We'll see. I was debating whether to use my triple captain first game of the season. I'll wait until there's a double game week. So yeah, I think Everton will be okay this season. I think top six would be good for them, basically. I can't see them breaking top four. Leicester is a side who I think are going quietly about doing some really good things. Obviously, the news with them has been dominated by the fact that they lost Harry Maguire for 80 million to Man United. Big loss. This is the guy they kind of want to replace him. Kaglar Sunuku, the Turkish defender. If we look at who they signed, though, Iosi Perez, decent, proven Premier League in a struggling Newcastle side every season. So with a bit more, what would be the word? A bit more freedom. Maybe he can do a bit better. And Yuri Tielemans, who I think looked excellent. But other than that, I'm like, not signed that many players, have they? I think they've definitely I don't think they've, I don't think they've in minus figures. Dennis Praet came in actually late on as well, attacking kind of midfielder. I think on paper they look pretty decent. Good goalkeeper in Schmeichel. Chilwell. Morgan is experienced. Fuchs is experienced. I think the defence is a little weaker, but we'll see kind of what happens. Midfield wise, they have some good young players. Ndidi always look good. Barnes is looking really good. Albrighton's kind of a proven guy. Gray, I feel like he needs to do a bit more to step up to that kind of potential he has, but he is a decent player. Maddison obviously is a quality player. Quite surprised a bigger club didn't come in for him. And then Yuri Tielemans looking quality. We'll see what Dennis Praet is like. Comes from Sampdoria, I believe. Quite highly thought of, but we'll see. Up front, Iosi Perez and Vardy, and then you've got Iniacho, Salami. I think, from my opinion, Leicester, they looked pretty good under Rodgers end of last season, and he has strengthened, but he has lost Maguire, and I think that's a big loss for them. So I'd imagine top 9 or 8, between 9th and 6th, but I'd be surprised if they managed to go further than that currently. But I think Rodgers is a decent manager, but we'll see what happens. Next up, Liverpool, who really didn't do a lot in the transfer window, did they? But did they need to? They have a pretty decent squad. So all they signed was Van der Berg, Elliott and Adrian. They lost Sturridge, who was released. They lost Danny Ings, but he was kind of gone anyway. Lots of players gone out on loan. Mignolet went. Again, not really great loss, is it? I'm not even going to try and pronounce this guy's name. But they got Adrian as a backup keeper. I think that's a really good backup signing, personally. Alisson, obviously, number 1 by a million miles. Defence is still looking very, very good. Van Dijk, Lovren, Gomez. I imagine Gomez and Van Dijk are going to be the number 1 if they both stay fit, with Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. I was surprised Palace didn't go back in for a Nathaniel Klein, but this guy Kiana Hoover, or whoever, however you pronounce it, is up and coming, looking pretty good, so we could see him break through a little bit in some games this season. Matip as well looked really solid actually when he played alongside Van Dijk in a lot of games. Midfield wise, same old faces really, but I feel like they have kind of got better in a way, because Oxlade-Chamberlain's back from injury, Lallana's kind of back from injury. And I feel like that really does strengthen them a lot. Your options are Fabinho, Wijnaldum, Milner, Keita, Henderson, Lallana, Oxlade-Chamberlain. That's really good. You're going to play 3 out of that. You have a lot of options there. That's 7 quality midfielders. Really, really good. I think some young players, obviously, who can come in every now and then. Very highly thought of. Up front is where I feel like they needed to strengthen a touch. Obviously, the front 3 of Firmino, Mane, Salah is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. One of the best, front 3 in the world. But it's a long old season. Rotation needs to happen, and to bring in players, they're going to have Shaqiri, who I think is a very, very good player. But I feel like he needs to play week in, week out to really see the best from him, which is not going to happen. Rhian Brewster is a very highly thought of young player. He is very good, has looked good, but he has come back off a long injury. So I guess his game time is going to be limited anyway, but hopefully he kind of breaks through, because I know he is very, very good, and obviously a young English player. Origi looked, obviously single-handedly won the Champions League for Liverpool last season. Absolutely. No, I mean, I never felt like, let's face it, if he hadn't scored those few goals he scored at the end of the season, Origi, I don't think would be at Liverpool this season, weirdly. But I think because of that, because of his kind of cult hero status now, people are expecting a lot more from him. I don't think he has a lot more. So he clearly is nowhere near as good as these front three. Can he do a job if he comes in, in the League Cup, or comes on with 10, 15 minutes left, potentially? I don't feel like Liverpool have got worse. I feel like they have got better, especially in that kind of midfield with these two guys back. And I think they're definitely going to challenge for the league this season. We'll see, though, what kind of comes about. Injury-wise, is always a massive factor, and if they do lose a couple of those big players, one or two of the front three get injured, they do not look the same, do they? So we'll see. And they've had, that front three have been at the African Cup of Nations. Well, Firmino obviously hadn't. Mane and Salah have been at African Cup of Nations, so I don't feel like they've had necessarily a massive rest. And when you think about it, like Salah was at the World Cup the year before. Like, he hasn't really had like a summer off, has he? So I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking a little bit leggy come the end of the season, but we'll see. Next up, Man City, who I guess obviously are the biggest threat to Liverpool wanting to win the league, as they have won the league for the last 2 seasons. Clearly one of the best teams in the world. On their day can absolutely beat anyone. Strengthened where they needed to strengthen. I think most people could agree. They needed someone to be able to come in and not necessarily replace Fernandinho, but definitely do his job when he can't play. He is getting on a bit now, and they did that with is it Rodrigo they're calling him? I thought his name was Rodri. It is Rodri. Have they not got... Is that... It's confused the hell out of me now. Okay, fine. He's either Rodri or Rodrigo. Fine, yeah, just whatever. So they've done that with Rodri, or Rodrigo, whatever you want to call him. Surely this year Phil Foden's got to play a bigger role. David Silva's getting on a little bit now, we can agree, I think. De Bruyne, I didn't feel like had his best season last season. He has been hit with injuries, so this could be a really big year for him. But Bernardo Silva came through and looked brilliant, I thought, coming through there. They signed Cancelo as well. They've always had fullback problems. Angelino, I think, is a left fullback. I think they had him, but they loaned him out and then brought him back, I believe. From PSV. So he played very well for PSV. Yes, it's the Dutch league, but he did play very well. So there's there. You obviously have Zinchenko. They've lost company, which is really the biggest loss. That's a guy who's a leader off the field and on the field. A massive player for the club, really massive. And you can't underestimate how much of a loss that could be. I think they're going to do well this season. Sane is out, injured for a while. They obviously have... I'm not sure he was even really a first choice player, really. I don't know if Pep 100% believes in him, but they clearly up front are looking phenomenal. I think Jesus has got to play a bit more this season. I think Aguero's time is not coming to an end, but I think he's going to play less and less over the next few seasons. With Jesus, I think they want him to come in. He must be still quite young. He's only 22. I feel like the guy's been around forever. He's only 22. That's scary. I feel like this is a massive season for him. Aguero's 32, 31. I don't feel like he's on the wane, but he's still easily good enough to play in this side. But I do feel like there's going to be that slight transition this season. Sterling was phenomenal last season. Don't underestimate him doing exactly the same this season. yeah, they're going to be tough to beat, really tough. Edison solved their goalkeeper problem. In terms of like defence, I don't feel like they're short at centre back, but I do feel like they needed to maybe sign a centre back. I don't think Mangala is in their plans really. Laporte looked pretty good last season. Stones hasn't quite made that his own, has he? The centre back position. Otamendi the same. So yeah, I feel like if you were being very highly critical, you would say central defence could be a bit of an issue. Along with potentially left back, although I think they're going to be okay. Right back, they've got Walker and Cancelo. That's very good. If you look at left back, the options they've got are Mendy, Angelino, Zinchenko. He's not a left back, but obviously they have played him there. He kind of is now a left back. So I think they've got enough options. They've got 2 players in every position. It's just going to be about injuries, I think. I really feel like this season is going to be down to injuries. Who's going to have that player out first, that top player? So obviously Man City are going to be first or second. I feel like that's just a given. In terms of the squad of Man United, I don't feel like Man United have had a good transfer window. I know that sounds weird, but I don't feel like they have. They signed 3 players. People were talking about nearly their entire team needing to be turned over. They signed Daniel James, who's a young winger or wide forward or whatever you want to call him. They signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka. They needed a right back. They signed a right back. So, yep, brilliant. And they signed Harry Maguire. They needed a centre back, but they didn't just need one centre back. They kind of needed 2 centre backs. Keeper obviously sorted De Gea. Romero's a decent understudy as well. Lindelof has never really, I don't think, looked incredible. Bally, I think, has looked good, but I think he did fall out a little bit with Mourinho, which is why he didn't play so much. Phil Jones, I feel like they should have offloaded some of these players, whether it's Smalling or Jones, definitely a Rojo. Young, I mean, I don't think he's going to be playing too much this season. Dalot is a decent young defender. Luke Shaw, if they keep him fit, he's looking good. Darmian, I think he should have gone as well. I don't think he's ever really done much for them. Wan-Bissaka clearly is going to be right back. Fosu Mensah, very good defender, I think, personally. Twanzebe, again, young but potential there. And then Maguire obviously coming in to be that real lynch point. I think they're hoping he's going to be a Virgil van Dijk. I'm not sure he is, but I know that's the hope. A lot of money spent on him. Clearly good with the ball at his feet as well. Could be a great signing. I don't feel like they have the worst defence in the world, but and clearly that defence is way better now with Wan-Bissaka and Maguire than it was last season. So I think with those 2, you're going to say Shaw to play along, on the left, and maybe a Bally or a Lindelof or a Jones or a Smalling alongside Maguire. I think that's decent enough. That's a top 6 defence in my opinion, especially with De Gea in goal. Where I think they fall apart a little bit is midfield and attack. So midfield, they lost Herrera, and I don't really feel like they signed anyone to replace him. Maybe they didn't want to. To be fair, they've got Pogba, Mata, Lingard. Pogba on his day is a world-class midfielder, but his day is just once every 6 games, it would appear. Mata, I think, is a top-quality midfielder, but he never gets used correctly, does he? So he never really does what he can. Lingard, if he can stay fit, is decent. Everyone seems to think Jesse Lingard's this youth player. He's 26. He is 26. He's got his kick on, I think. He seems to play, I don't know. He's not consistent enough, in my opinion. Pereira is decent, but I don't know if he would be considered good enough to be a first choice top 6 midfielder. Same with Fred, hasn't really done much since he's come along. Matic is good, but he is getting on a bit now, and I feel like he was a Jose Mourinho signing. McTominay's good. Still a bit raw, but he's good. And that's it. I mean, you've got Daniel James as a midfielder, but he would be playing in a front line. I feel like that's it. And then they lost Lukaku. So on transfer deadline day, they lost Lukaku for like 70 million. When you look at how much they've spent, so they spent 15 on James, call it 50 on Bissaka, so that's 65, and 80 on Harry Maguire, which is 145 million. That's a lot of money to spend. They got back 70 million, so that's 70 million, like 75 million net. Herrera was about Herrera was a free, sorry, my mistake. So they've spent about 70 million. I kind of felt like they needed to spend a bit more. Up front, they look weak, in my opinion. Sanchez, I mean, I don't even know why the guy's still at the club. He has done nothing. Everyone seems to think, this season's going to be a season. I don't think he's going to do anything, personally. Rashford, so much promise. 10 goals last season in 33 appearances. 7 goals in 35. Yes, he's only 21. Prolific, he has not been. Martial, 10 goals last season. They need these guys to be scoring 20 goals a season at least. Greenwood's very young. I don't think they're going to break top 6. I don't rate Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think their defence looks much better, but I think that's been at the cost of weakening their attack. Lukaku, whatever you want to say about him, not fitting in, whatever, he will score you goals. I don't know if they've got like his stats. So 42 goals in 96, 77 of those came as a starter. And 77 of those came as a starter? What? Okay. So I think they're saying like he's been played wide. But if you look at his record with other clubs as well, he's always been a goal scorer in the Premier League. And I think that is a big loss for them. I don't think they're going to... Some people have rated them to get top 4. I don't see it personally. But we'll see. When I do my prediction, I might change my mind. Newcastle, obviously, big news from Newcastle was losing Rafa and getting in Steve Bruce. Steve Bruce has got a lot of shit, but he's a decent manager. And he is a Geordie. He will give it his all. And who else were they going to get, really? I don't think on paper they've got a terrible side. I rate Almiron. I think after he looked good in but a little inconsistent last season. But I think with that under his belt, he'll be all right. Joe Linton, as they say, as they call him, it's Joe Linton up north. I think could be a great signing for them. But again, he's coming from the German league, was it? Hoffenheim. Firmino came from Hoffenheim and he's been pretty good, but it might take him a little while to bed in. I rate Muto a lot. I think he's a very good forward player. Not prolific, but he works his socks off. I've always rated Dwight Gale. Always. I don't think he'll play, but I kind of hope he does, but I don't think he will. Andy Carroll, I wouldn't look too much into that. I think that's a real backup one. I think he's on like a pay-as-you-play deal, so I don't think they're going to lose too much. Didn't pay anything for him. Longstaff, a lot's been kind of said about him. Oh my God, look how much he looks like his brother. That's ridiculous. Matt Ritchie's decent. John Joe Shelvey can be good on his day. Atsu's right. I think they'll be fine, Newcastle. Bruce is good enough to get this out of them, but I mean, the problem I feel is that like Newcastle and Dubravka has been a decent signing. I feel like the problem with Newcastle is the fans feel like because the club's big enough to push on, but they don't have the players, and to get the players in, they would need to spend hundreds of million, and Ashley is not going to do that. I think Ashley sometimes gets undeserved stick and sometimes doesn't. I think to turn around and be like, as an owner, he should be putting in millions into the club or whatever is unrealistic. I also don't feel like in the past he has invested when he's needed to. I feel like he's started to sign a few players, but he's never going to be that owner who delves into his pocket, and he's going to run the club like a business. That's what he is. He's a businessman at the end of the day. I don't necessarily feel like that's a terrible thing, because at the end of the day, if Ashley leaves, Newcastle will be fine. You can't say that about every Premier League club. If their owner leaves, will they be fine? A lot of owners absolutely bankroll their clubs, in various different ways. I saw about the Derby owner who bought the ground and then leases it back. Brought the ground for like 80 million to help, with a cash injection into the club and stuff like that. Like, that isn't a viable long-term solution. eventually that guy's not going to own the club anymore, whether or not that's because he's no longer around or because he's got fed up with it or whatever. And then where are you? You know? So I feel like sometimes Ashley gets a real rough ride because he doesn't go out there and spend all the money. But I also feel like he could have done a lot more the last few seasons. And also his apparent kind of disdain, for fans and things like that really doesn't help either. They lost Iosi Perez, which is a loss. He was a very good player. Still think they've got enough about them up front to do something. I think they'll be fine. I genuinely do. Next up, we have Norwich City. Norwich City came up as champions. Had a very good season. I'm going to say right at the bat, I think they're going to get relegated. I really do. I just don't think. I think something like 25% of their appearances last season were by youth players at Norwich, which says a lot about their youth, to be fair. It also says, I think, they're woefully unprepared for the Premier League. They got Patrick Roberts on loan from Man City. He's a decent young player. There's nobody here who I'm looking at that going, that is a Premier League signing. Every single one of them has just been solid players. Yeah, they've got a lot of them in, but if none of those players are good enough for a Premier League, where are the goals coming from? Timo Pukki. I think Timo Pukki had a brilliant season last season. I would seriously question whether or not he can do that in the Premier League, or will even get the same service in the Premier League that he had last season. I don't rate Norwich. I don't think they're going to stay up. They could, but it will be a battle all season, in my opinion. I think they'll be fine if they go down. Like, they're good enough for that, but like they haven't gone out of their way to, they haven't spent millions and millions and millions on players. But I worry that these players are not good enough. They have a good manager, and that can make a big difference. And obviously a lot of the players know each other and coming up with that kind of winning mentality. But their first game of the season is tonight against Liverpool. I can't see anything but Liverpool stuffing them, I'll be honest. So that is as a potential first game. I think that, weirdly, I feel like the game tonight will be a real make or break moment for them. If they can get a result, even a draw, that could really spur them on. But if they go out there and get tonked, it's going to be hard for them to pick up after that. Sheffield United, I feel like are in the same boat. The one thing I would say about Sheffield United is I feel like there's no pressure on them. No one expects them to stay up. Look at these players. I mean, no offence to them, but does any one of these really stand out as like, oh my God, this guy's a Premier League player? Admittedly, we've seen teams like Bournemouth come up and have the same mentality, and now their players are Premier League players, if that makes sense. And I think that Chris Wilder has done a brilliant job just getting them to the Premier League. And they broke their transfer record 3 times, so they have spent some money. Dean Henderson's a decent keeper. They signed like Lys Mousset, Ollie Burney, got Jagielka back. They've got Luke Freeman from QPR. They've signed some decent players. I just don't know if they're going to have enough about them in the Premier League to stay up. Ravel Morrison would either be brilliant for them, or most likely, there's a 10% chance Ravel Morrison will be brilliant. And when I say brilliant, I mean like amazing, because if you speak to people around him, they will say this guy has all the talent in the world. His attitude is terrible, and to be fair, everywhere he's been, it just has not worked out, and he's been in a lot of places. I really hope he takes that step up. He's 26 now. He's not going to get many more chances, is he, really? He really needs to grow up and buckle down. I just don't know if he's got it in him. I hope he has. You never want to see a player waste potential, and he has so much potential. I think Alex Ferguson said he was like one of the best young players he's ever seen. He's just, it's an attitude thing at the end of the day. I can't see Sheffield United staying up. But weirdly, I feel like they have a better chance than the other 2 promoted sides, weirdly. Just because I just feel like there's no pressure on them. They can go out there, and if they lose their first 3 games, I think people will just be like, it's Sheffield United. Whereas I feel like Norwich and Aston Villa have a little bit more pressure on them as well. So you never know. But yeah, Southampton is such a weird club. Who have Southampton signed? A guy from Standard Liège, Che Adams. They signed Ings permanently and Tommy Scott. I feel like Southampton are not a good side, and yet they're always in the Premier League. I don't. I look at their team and I'm like, I think Aston Villa are better than Southampton. I think they have a decent manager, and it makes a difference, but I've really not rated Southampton for many seasons. They've been super lucky to stay in the Premier League for the last few years. I feel like this season they'll probably stay up just because they always seem to. They're like Bournemouth in that way. Although I think Bournemouth are much better, much better than Southampton. I always underrate Bournemouth. Maybe I'm underrating Southampton a little bit. I don't feel like there's always a player or comes through for like them, whether it's an Armstrong or a Redmond or someone like that, or a Shane Long, just has a little spell where they just almost single-handedly get Southampton out of trouble, and I just wonder how often they can do that. Austin's gone. They've got Carrillo, Adams, Ings up front, Shane Long as well, I guess. I don't know about this Obafemi guy. Maybe he's all right. Redmond signed a new contract. They've got Armstrong, two kind of wide players. Højbjerg, Ward-Prowse, Romeo. They're decent. They're not going to set the world on fire, though, are they? Let's face it. Personally, I feel like that. They've got some decent keepers as well, to be fair. I don't know why McCarthy's number one. Surely Forster would be. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I see flirting with relegation, but probably absolutely fine. Tottenham have done some business this season, guys. Tottenham have signed some players. It's incredible. They didn't really lose anyone either, did they? Just kind of looking at. Okay, so Trippier, I guess, would be the big one they lost. Let me just adjust my microphone a little bit more closer to me. So Trippier was the big one they lost, although he didn't have a great season, did he? Let's face it. And they've got Walker-Peters who can kind of step up. Trippier on his day was better than Walker-Peters and Serge Aurier, without a doubt. But his day wasn't that often last season, was it? Let's face it. Lloris in goal, very good keeper. They've got Rose at left back, Ben Davies as well. I think they're both good. I'm not sure whether Rose wants to really be there, though. There was a lot of talk of him leaving. They've got Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Sanchez and Foyth for like central defence. Decent. I worry about long term whether Vertonghen and Alderweireld will still be there next season, but for this season that's good. Midfield, they're very well stocked now in midfield, I think. Much better depth than they have ever had. So Winks is great, Lamela's great, Wanyama's great, Dyer's great, Sissoko's great, Ali's great, Eriksen's great, Moira. I don't know too much about, or I don't think this guy's been brilliant. How much did he play last season, actually? He didn't play at all. He was on loan. No, he wasn't on loan. He just didn't play. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say he's great. Ndombele looks really good. Skip is up and coming. Lo Celso has been a player they've wanted for ages. Sessegnon's a great young player. I think their midfield is fantastic. Lot of legs there for the season. A lot of rotation can happen, and I think that's brilliant for them. They have two forwards, Min and Kane. I mean, if Kane stays fit the entire season, I could honestly see Tottenham challenging for the league title. I just don't think that's going to happen personally. And then if he gets injured and Son's also out at the same time, they literally don't have another striker. They're going to play Moira up front, I guess. I mean, why wouldn't they just sign a striker? Come on, Spurs. What are you doing? Sign a bloody striker. I mean, clearly they couldn't keep hold of Janssen. The guy is trash. But no offence, Vincent Janssen. You're better than me at football, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's let them down a bit. But otherwise, I think they had decent. They were trying to sign Dybala from Juve. It didn't quite go through. That would, I think, have taken them to the next level, personally. I think they would have been brilliant. I think they really would have been challenging, potentially. But I think they're pretty good. And with that new stadium, you know, first season proper season in the stadium, I think they're going to be at least third. Would be my bet. Watford have gone about themselves quietly and done a little bit of business, and I think most importantly not lost anybody, because they have some very good players. Ben Foster was arguably the best goalkeeper in the Premier League outside of Alisson and Edison. So he was fantastic for them. Very solid defence. Holebas had a pretty good season, I think. That's why I've put him in my team. Nothing there that you would say is incredible, but solid. Midfield wise, again, a lot of very solid players. A little bit of flair here and there. They managed to keep hold of the core. Everton were trying to sign him. Pereira has looked good. Capu's a thug. And up front, they signed Welbeck, which looks all right. I wouldn't think anything other than mid-table for Watford, but again, I think that's kind of where they're at, and they're fine with that in a way. Good cup run for them, maybe. I think they'd be happy with that. There's nothing really to write home about there, but I think they look all right. West Ham have made some moves. They lost Arnautovic, which everyone's like, oh, no big loss. Listen, when Arnautovic was playing at his best before the whole China thing turned his eye, he was phenomenal. Like, people were saying, like, this guy is a top 4 striker, and it's true, he was. And they're big boots to fill, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's no great loss because of his attitude, blah blah. But that was only really like last season. Before that, he was pretty phenomenal. They've signed Haller, who a lot of people are saying big things about him. We'll see. Always takes someone time to get in. Fornals looks pretty decent as a midfielder. Yarmolenko was injured, but he looked very good before his injury, so I'm excited to see what he can do. Declan Rice's quality. Mikel Antonia's quite an underrated player. Let's see if Wilshere can stay fit. How many games did he play last season? He played 8 games. Yeah. Good luck to Jack Wilshere. He deserves an injury-free season. Let's put it that way. Noble's getting on a bit, but he's still great in the dressing room. Lanzini, Anderson looked actually really good. I was really happy with him because he has a lot of potential, but I almost felt like coming to the Premier League might have been a bit much for him. But he had a really good season, I think, for a first season. So I think he's going to go on and be great this season. In defence, I think they're looking solid, if a little thin, perhaps. But yeah, Fabianski, pretty good in goal. So I think they're decent. People are saying that West Ham are going to break into top 6. I'm not convinced by this, but they'll be around there, shall we say. And finally, last but definitely not least, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Speaking of teams who have made moves, Wolves were kind of the shocker last season, weren't they? Had a brilliant last season. Who have they signed? They've signed Jimenez permanently. Brilliant. He obviously was phenomenal for them last season. They signed Hong from Yeovil Town. Naya from PSG. Who is Naya? Who is Hong? I want to know Hong. Is Naya a midfielder or a defender or even a striker? Who knows? He's not even on here. Fair enough. Dendoncker, they had him on loan last season. He looked good for them, so it's a good signing. Vallejo, they got on loan. I think he's a defender, isn't he? Vallejo, yeah. He's a defender on loan from Real Madrid. Decent enough. They find Cotrone from AC Milan. I would say about Cotrone is that he has a lot of potential, but if AC Milan are quite willing to let him go, maybe he's not quite the wonder kid everyone thinks he is, maybe. I feel like he's good backup for Jimenez and Jota. I'm just not 100% sure he's going to set the world on fire. But also sometimes people get moved. Let's face it. When Coutinho left Inter Milan, no one thought he was going to be as good as he was. So you never know, do you? It could just be that it wasn't the right club for him. I hope he does do well. They got Neto from Braga, Jordao from Braga. So they signed their quota of Portuguese players. They now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Portuguese players. They've got more Portuguese players than they do English players. So they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, it's technically the same. Fair enough. People are saying Wolves are going to break into top 6 this season. Will they do that? I feel the only thing that's stopping them potentially from doing that is the Europa League. We saw the effect it had on Burnley. Do they have a bigger squad to cope with that? I don't know. I mean, they could win the Europa League, let's face it. Who needs to break into the top 6? You get 10th, win Europa League, you're in the Champions League next season, Wolves. I think they have the quality where they could do that. So if I were them, just go for the Europa League. But yeah, I think they're very good. I'd say outside of the top 6, they're looking like they're one of the best. Absolutely. Which you've only got to give credit to everyone involved in the club, really, for that, because they were nowhere before those guys came in, really, were they? They were in League One, I think, when those guys came in, and now they're potential top 6 side in the Premier League. So absolutely fair play. And whatever, I don't know if everything's been cleared up around ownership and stuff like that, and clearly there are strong links to Portugal, but I guess they haven't been found of anything, like they haven't been found guilty of anything, so you have to just accept it for what it is and say fair play. Good luck to them. That's the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of gone through the teams. God, this is a long bloody video, isn't it? Let's go for my prediction table. So, I don't know where to start, really. Let's start with who I think is going to get relegated. So, I think Norwich. I think Sheffield United. Who do I think next? Who? I think Aston Villa might pip Southampton. Why do I think that? Oh, Southampton just doesn't inspire me as a better side than Aston Villa. But Aston Villa haven't got the goals. Southampton got the goals. Yeah, no, I'll switch it, I think. Southampton and then Aston Villa. So I feel like the 3 going down and the 3 who came up. If Wesley kicks off and does well, I think Aston Villa could stay up, but I worry where the goals come from there. Sheffield United, I actually feel like they could do it, could stay up, because I feel like they've got that team ethic. I don't think Norwich got enough about them. Let's go back up to first. So for me, it's out of Liverpool and Man City. I think it comes down to injuries, I think, but I feel like Man City have got the better squad depth than Liverpool, especially up front. So I'm going to go Man City, Liverpool. I think Spurs are a kind of no-brainer for third, and you never know what's going to kind of happen from there. Fourth place is the difficult one. So you have Arsenal, you have Chelsea, you have Man United. You also have potentially Wolves. I see Chelsea personally. That would be my opinion. I think they've got a good enough squad to get fourth. Fifth, Arsenal. Sixth, Man United. Oof. That's a tough one, isn't it? A lot of people are not going to be happy with that, I guess. Just don't think up front Man United have got enough about them. Arsenal have firepower up front, but a crap defence. Still, it's better than it was, actually, to be fair. I've got to give them credit. It is much better. I think Chelsea just have some real quality, even though they haven't been able to sign anyone. My only worry with Chelsea to not go further is because it's Frank Lampard's first season with them, and I think he's nowhere near the same level as a Pochettino, Klopp or Guardiola. But I think, yeah, so I would stick with that personally. And I would say Ole Gunnar's not going to be there next season. That would be my opinion. 16th. So who's going to potentially struggle down towards the bottom? I would say Newcastle. I'm not necessarily sure they're going to be in a relegation battle, but they're going to be down there. 15th, I would go for Brighton. 14th, I would go with Burnley. 13th, I would probably say Crystal Palace. Palace kind of depending on whether Zaha's going to be firing. But with no striker, I don't think we could hope for anything better than 13th. I'm probably being very biased here to put them as high as 13th. I think if you could probably say 17th, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you based upon Palace. But yeah, there we go. Let's go back up here now for 7th. I think Wolves are the best of the rest. And Wolves could overtake Man United. I think they have the potential to be better than Man United in terms of the squad. But the Europa League, for me, I think will stop them from necessarily challenging. 8th, Everton, which I don't think is very good for Everton at all. Maybe then a West Ham. I'm going to go for a Bournemouth in 10th. There's something about Bournemouth this season. Then I'm going to go for a Leicester. Then I'm going to go for a Watford. That would be my confirmed selection. Here we go. Let's zoom out a little bit so you can actually see. Didn't really work that well, but anyway, you can see it. So yeah, Man City. I mean, you could interchange these depending, I think, upon injuries, and even Spurs, if they keep their players fit, they could challenge. They have a phenomenal midfield. I just worry about Kane staying fit for the season. But if he does, they could challenge. They genuinely could. Chelsea, I think, just have very good quality players and strength in depth. I just worry slightly about Frank as in his first season in the Premier League as a manager. Will he be tactically good enough to get points off City, Liverpool, Tottenham? You know, will he be able to manage those players? Arsenal, Man United. I don't think Arsenal's defence is still quite good enough, and I still worry about their midfield. I don't think they're good enough. I think they'll finish 5th. But if that front three, Lacazette, Aubameyang, Pepe, kick on, they could break into a top 4. Man United, I don't feel there's enough about them up front or in midfield for them to challenge for a top 4 place at all. I think their defence is much, much better, but I still don't think there's enough. Wolves, very good, but I think Europa League's going to hold them back. Everton, they just never quite managed to get there, do they, Everton? They sign a lot of players, but that's kind of about it. You got West Ham. I think 9th would be fine. Anywhere between 9th and 7th would be fine for West Ham. I don't think they're ready yet to kick on from there. I feel like Bournemouth have a little bit more about them this season. Just like the look of that Bournemouth team for once. I always rate them really low. Leicester, the Maguire loss could be quite big for them, I think. And they signed some decent players, but not quite enough. They could be a surprise. I think Rodgers finished the season really well. And, you know, if they finish 7th, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Watford, again, just very solid team. You know, I feel like this 7th to 12th is very interchangeable as a kind of like a mini league in the mid-table almost. You know, with possibly even 6th to 12th actually being a mini league. And then possibly Arsenal and Chelsea maybe battling it out for 4th. And then Spurs maybe consolidating 3rd and then the top 2. But again, injuries and all that type of stuff can take its toll. And then I think the kind of the bottom 7 here are going to kind of battle it out. I think Crystal Palace, Burnley, Brighton, Newcastle will have enough about them to not be dragged in. You could argue maybe Newcastle a little bit. How will Bruce do? But I think he's good enough, and I think they're good enough to avoid relegation. Then I think it's that 4 battling it out to try and stay up. Who knows? Let me know what you think, because I'm genuinely interested. It's been a long video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I have enjoyed doing it. If you want to still join the Plays League, we have quite a few now. Quite a few. How many we've got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 in there. There'll be a prize for first place. You're more than welcome to join. What's the doesn't have the code here. I'll put the code in the description for that league. That's my first team, I think, going in. Let me know what you think. I'm always interested, and good luck. Whoever you support out there, whether they're in the Premier League, whether they're in the Championship, League One, if they're in a different country, I hope you have a great season. But ultimately, not everyone probably will, and I could be crying by the end of the season. But till then, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.